Welcome. This is Dr. Marcia Anderson with the Center of Expertise for School IPM. During today's webinar, we will discuss how to be proactive in your approach to managing cockroaches in your schools through Integrated Pest Management, or IPM. IPM will help you to prevent cockroaches and reduce potentially dangerous cockroach-related allergens and asthma issues. Our first presenter will be Dr. Phil Kaler. He is the University of Florida renowned professor of urban entomology and structural pest control. Next will be Janet Hurley. She's an extension program specialist specializing in school IPM at Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. And next, we have Fred Coble. He's the Plant Facilities Administrator in the Port Jefferson, New York School District. First up is Dr. Phil Kaler, who will introduce us to the wonderful world of cockroaches in schools. Dr. Kaler, the microphone is all yours.
Thank you very much. All right, I'd like to talk with you about cockroaches in schools. And actually, these are pests from the past. They've been around for a long time, and I think it's important for us to discuss some of the past issues that we've had with them. Back in time, German cockroach infestations occurred in affordable housing in very large numbers. This is some affordable housing that we worked in back in 1988 in Gainesville, Florida. It looks almost like a resort. However, when we placed traps out there, we would get heavy trap catches of German cockroaches. And in this particular trap, we ended up with about 225 cockroaches in the trap in just leaving it out there in a house in 24 hours. And you have to remember that that kids are living in these places, and when they go to school, they're going to be transporting cockroaches from these heavy infestations into schools. And if you take a look at one corner of a kitchen, you can see the large number of cockroaches that are there. And actually, in this kitchen, we swept up about 15,000 cockroaches just off of the floor of the kitchen after we had fogged it and tried to knock down all the cockroaches. So we had a heavy infestation in this particular apartment. And German cockroaches like to infest areas close to food and water, and especially water. So this infestation extended back into the bathroom. In the toilet, you can see that there are cockroaches floating in the water, and there are cockroaches on the floor. And in good infestations, they may extend into the bedrooms, especially if people are snacking or leaving drinks out overnight. In this case, you can see the cockroaches around the window and even on the bedding and the pillows. Now, that's the way it was in 1988, but guess what? Cockroaches are back, and they're back from coast to coast. You can find heavy infestations all the way from New York to California to Florida. What's interesting is the American Housing Survey is done every other year, and it's actually sponsored by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they survey cockroaches as a quality of life measure because they affect the health and safety of residents. The last time the survey was done was in 2015. Now, if you take a look at the results of that survey, you can see that in a place like Detroit, 1.7% of residents said that they had roaches living in their homes. About 18 to 19% of people said in New York City that they had cockroaches. And of course, the further south you go, the heavier the infestations in residences. Jacksonville had 22%. Miami, about 1 in 3 residences had cockroaches. Houston was the same situation, and Tampa actually topped the national list as having the most cockroaches in infesting residents. Sometimes the infestations can get so heavy that the residents are evicted and they tear down the structure. So, for instance, this is a Jacksonville apartment complex where they said that it was unfit for human habitation with roaches, bats, and dangerous wiring, and the residents were angry because they gave very short notice for them to leave the place, and they weren't allowed to come back. Of course, these infestations in homes then spread into schools, and it's a constant battle for schools to be able to handle cockroaches. In this particular case, a mother was saying, my son's school is infested with cockroaches. Am I the only one who thinks this is unacceptable? He has asthma. Parents and staff all seem not to care one whit that there are cockroaches. Roaches are seen running on the walls in the cafeteria. Am I overreacting, or is this unacceptable in a child's school? So basically, cockroaches have returned. They're back in schools. Places are being closed. You see all the time that restaurants are being closed because of cockroach infestations, and there are many cases where schools are overrun with cockroaches, and they're having to either shut them down for treatment or to be able to try to handle those infestations. When people get frustrated, they tend to do irrational things. So for instance, this is an apartment in Atlanta where a woman attempting to get rid of cockroaches caused an explosion. What she did was set off 14 indoor foggers in the kitchen, and she set them off before she left for work, and then there was a spark from probably the refrigerator that set the butane off that was the propellant in the foggers, and you ended up with an explosion that blew out the side of the apartment. So people will do irrational things when they have a heavy infestation. Now, some of the important cockroach species that you may deal with, I have pictured here. So for instance, in the upper left-hand side, I have an American cockroach, and you can see on the pronotum that there's a brown pattern in the center. However, there are no bars on the front of the wings. There's a lightish area there, but that's not a true bar. And then there are thin cerci at the back end. Next to it is an Australian cockroach, which now is one of our most important species in Florida. Outside, it's a paradomestic species. It has a dark Batman-like pattern on its pronotum, the area right behind the head. It has light bars on the edges of the wings. And you contrast that with a smoky brown cockroach, which a little further north from us in the Carolinas and further north in the country, the smoky brown has been a very important outdoor species. You can see that it has a uniform dark brown pronotum and no bars on the wings at all. And then if you go further north, you have the oriental cockroach, which is a principal species outside. The male is going to have wings that are about 3/4 the length of the abdomen, and the female is going to just have wing pads. Now those four up top tend to be paradomestic species. The German cockroach is one that lives almost exclusively inside homes. It has two dark stripes on the pronotum, and it has a brown center. These things are about 5/8 of an inch long. It has a brown center between those stripes, and it has a body that has a brownish hue. Some areas of the country have Asian cockroaches, which live outside, not really, they can't invade inside, but they don't breed inside. They have two stripes on the pronotum and a lighter color in the center between those two stripes, and it has a slender body with a grayish hue. So let's see if you can guess which pest this is. There are more than 1 million of these insects have been found in a two-family dwelling. Females will carry their egg case, the ootheca, until the eggs are ready to hatch. That's the German cockroach. That's the one with the brown center between the two bars on the pronotum, and that egg capsule is going to be carried until it is ready to hatch. So as far as the German cockroach, its scientific name is Blatella germanica. Its native range is in human habitations really throughout the world, and we've collected them all the way from Alaska in the United States down to the southern end of Florida and all places in between. Its distribution is cosmopolitan throughout the United States. In other words, wherever people are, this cockroach is going to occur. As far as its ecology, it breeds only in and around human dwellings, especially in kitchens and bathrooms, and it is the most abundant and economically important species in the United States. As far as the German cockroach life cycle, usually for most of the cockroaches, including the German, about 80% of the population is going to be in the nymphal stage. And the egg to adult development is going to take about 3 to 4 months. And the female carries the ootheca until it's ready to hatch. And the egg hatch is going to occur in about 28 days after it's deposited. And a female can produce about 4 to 5 egg capsules in her lifetime. And each egg capsule has about 30 to 40 eggs, and they're going to produce about 30 to 40 nymphs. Those nymphs then develop through the first stage, second stage, third stage, fourth stage, fifth stage. And I have each one of those nymphal stages occurring there on the first, third, and fifth, so you can see what those look like. Okay, a second cockroach that's very important. Let's see if you can guess which this one is. Sailors and ships infested by this insect use gloves while sleeping to prevent fingernail gnawing. And they may reproduce parthenogenically without males. That's the American cockroach. So we used to have a colony of these that we had no males in at all. The females would reproduce, and that was because they could produce their viable eggs without ever mating. In normal situations, you have males and females, and they will reproduce very well. The American cockroach, its native range is cosmopolitan also. It's originally from Africa, and its distribution is through the entire United States. It's found in all urban areas in the U.S., and it breeds in warm, humid, moist areas. Most notably, it's going to be found associated with sewers and also ductwork. So if you think about it, you've all seen drains in the floor. What you see is that grate up on top there on the right-hand side. And American cockroaches can be down in the sewer and crawl directly in from areas in the sewer. And we've seen schools that have had this particular issue where the cockroaches are entering through the floor drains. And of course, there's a side pocket in these drains where there is food debris that can accumulate. So it kind of lures the cockroaches up from the sewers to the schools. And if you take a look on the left-hand side, those are American cockroaches in a sewer system. And actually, a lot of sewer workers will tell you that if there aren't cockroaches that they see, they're afraid to go down because of sewer gases. They're kind of the canary of the sewer system. So one of the solutions that we had found here in Florida with some of these floor drains is something that is called a green drain, which is something that seals the sewers so that water can go down, but the cockroaches can't go up, and that can be inserted into the floor drain to prevent cockroach entry. And there was one school that these were installed in about a year and a half ago, and it completely solved the American cockroach problem they had in them coming up from the drains into the school. So the American cockroach life cycle is a little bit different than the German. Again, about 80% of the population is going to be nymphs. The female deposits her egg capsules, so she can produce more egg capsules than the German, but she has fewer young, 14 to 16 young per egg capsule. And the egg to adult development is about 20 months, so it's almost a year for these cockroaches to get to the adult stage. Most problems with these are where they're migrating into the school from elsewhere. So if we take a look at those two species that I covered, we have the German cockroach on the left and the American cockroach on the right. And you can see that the German cockroach is going to be brought into schools maybe on backpacks from kids coming into the school from infested residences, maybe on purses from people that are coming into the school and having cockroaches hiding in their purses. Sometimes they're delivered in cardboard boxes to the schools, and sometimes they'll even be in food trucks or in the food carts that are coming to the schools. So German cockroaches are primarily moved from place to place by human movement of things like backpacks, purses, cardboard, food carts. And the American cockroach is a completely different story, where usually the American cockroach is going to gain access through poor weather stripping around entry doors, maybe poor caulking around and cracks around doors and windows, maybe even from a dry P-trap underneath a sink or a drain. And as I mentioned, they can come up from the floor drains. Sometimes the infestation may be associated with rooftops that aren't maintained properly. So the American cockroach infestation is going to come from a completely different place than the German cockroach. Now, there are several reasons to control cockroaches, all the way from psychopathology to mechanical damage, where they can gnaw off your eyelashes when you're sleeping at night, allergies, asthma, transmission of pathogens, and even closure of schools. There was a very important study that was done that was published in 1997 in the New England Journal of Medicine that's called The Role of Cockroach Allergy and Exposure to Cockroach Allergen Causing Morbidity Among Inner City Children. They went to places where there aren't as many cockroaches as we have in the South, New York, Washington, D.C., St. Louis. They found high cockroach allergen levels in over half the bedrooms of children in those locations, and about 37% of the children were allergic. And what they found in that study, that when you put the allergic children together with high allergen levels, there were more lost school days, more medical visits, more hospital visits, and even the caregivers lost more nights of sleep because of the presence of cockroaches. So school IPM, it can be very difficult because in any one classroom, you may have some parents that say they don't want their children exposed to cockroaches crawling around on their desks during the day or night. And in the same classroom, you may have parents that say their child has a right to be there and not be exposed to pesticides. So it can often be a balancing act to try to decide how are you going to control pests and how are you going to reduce the presence of pesticides. And when we started school IPM in Florida back in the early 1990s, we set it up on 4 principles that everyone could agree on, whether they didn't want pesticides or whether they didn't want pests. The first step in our school IPM program was to prevent pests through sanitation, inspection, and exclusion as the primary methods of cockroach control. Second, monitor. In other words, you find out when and where cockroaches are present, and you treat when cockroaches are present. There's no point in trying to kill cockroaches if they're not there to kill. Third, we suggested mapping out areas to target treatments to the cracks and crevices where cockroaches are hiding and also people do not contact. So for instance, on the right-hand side, I have a map where cockroaches were monitored, and we found that there were heavy infestations in those places, so in the red, so that we could target the areas where cockroaches were and where people wouldn't touch as much. And lastly, treatments treatment should be selected with least risk. So from the standpoint of integrated cockroach treatments, we have several ways that treatments can be accomplished. First of all, baits. Baits overcome problems with insecticide resistance in cockroaches. They eliminate insecticide contamination of many surfaces because they can be applied as a gel to cracks and crevices. And they can also decrease the preparation time to do a cockroach treatment. Sprays are also available, and those sprays can be applied as a residual to cockroach harborages. And they can be valuable in areas where there is competing food and baits may not work as well. And they can also be used when there are problems with bait aversion, which is where they won't eat the bait because they've been able to detect the sugars that are used in the common bait formulations. And then lastly, dust can be used to eliminate cockroaches from voids and also cracks and crevices, and perhaps move the cockroaches from hard-to-treat areas to areas where they can be treated more easily. So in summary, cockroaches are back everywhere. We found them in schools. We found them in restaurants. There are health department reports that are done done in many parts of the country that document the presence of cockroaches. We know that they're coming back and are prevalent in many apartments and condominiums. You need to be able to recognize the important cockroach species, particularly the German cockroach and the American cockroach. And you have to understand how these different cockroach species are going to enter schools. And that's very helpful to you, because if you can have a program that your primary method of control is to prevent cockroach entry, you can be very successful. And of course, you need to implement an IPM program which is based on prevention, monitoring, mapping, and treating. And the potential treatments that you can choose from are perhaps baits, sprays, and dust. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaler, for that informative presentation on what we should all know about cockroaches. Next up is Ms. Janet Hurley from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, who will delve deeper into cockroach dilemmas in schools. Janet, please take it away.
Thank you, Marcia, and thank you, Dr. Kaler, for a very good primer on what are the cockroach species we need to be familiar with. I'm going to take what Dr. Kaler just talked about and put it into real action. So part of my job is assisting school districts around the state of Texas with their IPM programs. That includes when they have a pest problem, coming out and offering help in any way I can to help them solve a pest problem. A suburban school district in the North Texas area contacted me because they were having a problem with American cockroaches. This building was built in 2009, and it's approximately 155,000 square feet. And overall, it's a decent building design, except for we have some building practices here in Texas that lend itself to some challenges. And this challenge is called the cardboard carton form. As you can see in the upper left image with that green arrow, what that is demonstrating is the image below where the cardboard is encased with little holes. And on the right image, as you can see with the green arrow, is what it looks like below the foundation. So rather than pouring, say, an extra 12 inches of concrete that's going to shift and is going to move because of our soils here in the Texas area, we've been doing this practice with this cardboard underneath concrete on top of soil for a number of years. Those of you that understand buildings, you can start thinking about this, and those of you that understand pests, and if we think about what Dr. Kaler was telling us about where cockroaches actually, live and thrive, you can start understanding that there may be a problem with this cardboard underneath the structure. So, give you an aerial view of the school. So I wanted you guys to understand this is how large the school is. Those two yellow lines that you see on this screen are going to indicate expansion joints. That is extremely critical to this whole presentation. Going to those expansion joints, where you actually see that yellow, okay, on that schematic drawing is where this expansion joint is. As you can see in the actual photographic image, that silver bar, that is the expansion joint. So for some of you that may not be very familiar with building structure, what this means is where that silver bar is, there is concrete and the cardboard to one side, concrete and cardboard to the other side. There is a good 1/4 to a 1/2 inch gap in between to allow the building to shift and move with moisture, with drought, with everything else going on, which is great for buildings, but please understand now we're going to start talking about a cockroach. So the building features outdoors. As you can see in these two images, especially the image on the left with the green arrow, that black below that green arrow with the grass, That is actually the opening, y'all, for the expansion joint. So basically, when we were doing the inspection on this building, I was able to actually stick my arm in there, and I could feel air moving around. On the right image, the expansion joint is below the foundation line, and we actually have soil there. But as you can see, we have where the water with the down spigots come out, and even though we have a splash plate for the water, over time it will start eroding, and again will open up that gap like you can see in the left image. Indoors, on the indoor images, I want you guys to understand, on this building, as you can see from the schematics, there is a second floor. The second floor is all for mechanical rooms. These images are of the mechanical rooms. The image on the left with the green arrow, that is where the condensate goes down and it ties into the sanitary sewer. But again, as Dr. Kaler was talking about, this is how the cockroaches can come back up. This is one area out of two. Notice in the right image where the monitoring device. What did Dr. Kaler just talk to us about monitoring and mapping? Where would you put these things? Because this is where that human behavior conflicts with your IPM program. The next thing that we had problems with human behavior, item on the left. In the image on the left is a floor machine scrubber. Lots of schools use these. Water goes up in them. It's supposed to be much better, but we're going to see in a minute how bad that is. Second image on the right. They were baiting for the roaches and then they were monitoring. This isn't a test, but for those of you that have been doing this for a while, I am sure there are three things that you can see easily in this image that are wrong. For those of you that don't understand, I will point them out. First of all, where is the insect trap monitor? This is not exactly against the wall. It needs to be against the wall. The little disc in the back, okay, that is supposedly the cockroach bait station. One, it is upside down. Two, it is covered in cobwebs. Three, the cobwebs and the placements of everything. When you are monitoring for any type of pest, you have to make sure that your monitoring devices and your baits, if you're using baits, are placed in the right place. They were getting it, but they were missing the point because things weren't being done correctly. So back to that wonderful machine. The floor scrubber machine, as you can see from there, actually moves things around, and as I'm pointing out with that green arrow, what was happening is if the water was not drained out of that machine, the American cockroaches were actually getting up in the wheel housing of that device, and they were literally moving the American cockroaches from room to room around the school campus with one specific device. The other thing that was extremely important is making sure that mop water, mop heads, mop water, all of that has been drained. These are two major things that and even if you were the pest control contractor, you come in, you service the account, you leave, but you don't realize that the employees are actually not doing everything according to program, hence why it's so vitally important to have an IPM coordinator. All right, so the monitoring part. I can't stress this enough. IPM means you must do some type of monitoring, but where do you monitor? Top image. Look where that green arrow is and look where the monitoring device is. If you were wondering if American roaches were coming up out of that floor drain, rather than doing even something as fancy as that sticky card, you could do something as old-fashioned if you can get it to stick. This is the quirky part. Take clear tape, put it over that drain hole. They'll get stuck to it, or their antenna or their wings will. That's enough for monitoring so that you can know. The other thing is where you would bait. When we went back and did baiting, you could do bait treatments close to the lip of that so that if they came up, they'd get it and go right back down and not go all the way into your mechanical room because they're literally searching for it. In that bottom right image, again, where you see that piece of 2x4 and you see the monitoring device, which actually caught something, but it wasn't all together. It was further away. It had been smushed. You can't monitor if the devices aren't in the right place, and part of that education program is educating custodial or food service or whomever. First of all, where do you place the monitoring devices, and two, not moving the monitoring devices. So when I got with the school, and I will admit the top right image is not me at that particular school district, but that was the only image I had of me down on my hands and knees doing an inspection, because that's basically what we did. When you're doing an inspection, it's kind of hard to take pictures of yourself. I'm not a big selfie person. Enough said. But what we did was we really did inspect the campus. Seriously, 4:30 in the morning before anybody got there, late in the afternoon, meeting with contractors to figure out the building, because my role for the school district was help them solve this problem in all of its aspects, not just, oh, the principal, bottom left-hand corner, has got cockroaches in his office. Okay, this is all hands on deck. We've got cockroaches. We've got 6 weeks before school starts. What are we going to do? Because they're not going away. My goal was by the time school opened up in 6 weeks, those cockroaches were going to be gone. The other problem we had was, and I've seen this before, talking about sinks. All right, the sink on the bottom left, there's no trap. Sink on the top left, that cute little silver device that costs a couple of bucks, when put in place, sink clean, and if it's not in use, you put the locking mechanism so like you're going to put water in the sink, but what it also does, it doesn't allow anything to come back up. Simple fix. Items on the right of this image. Dr. Kaler, we're talking about trap guards. The green drain's the right one. The one with the gentleman in the blue shirt is a trap guard. There are others out there. There are several now that are coming on the market because this used to be installed back in the day to help with sewer gases. Then I don't know what we did to change that. They're coming back, but they help us with pest control. Not just cockroaches, but I can say this helps with flies and a couple of other things that may be coming out. So, I mean, this is, again, it may not be a cheap fix, but it is an economical long-term fix, because pouring water down a floor drain or mineral spirits so that the cockroaches don't come back up is not economically feasible if you are driving all over your school district and it is a 20-square mile radius. I'm talking large. It takes you an hour to get from one side to the other. It's not very economical. So, solving the pest problem. Notice the image up on the right. I really put this in just to remind everybody that when you place a sticky card, some type of monitoring device, make sure you do it correctly. Notice the image, notice that blue arrow, notice that it's not completely against one wall, that it's only against part of a wall. Because again, they're thigmotactic, they've got to be able to go around and hit things. Part of the other thing we had to do was cleaning up old bait. They had used some granular, they had used some bait stations, and they also used containerized, gel bait. These are all things that's great, but if you're going to go in and start anew, you have to get rid of the old to look for the new. Sealing up areas, adding door sweeps, installing the trap guards. They had not done it at this campus, but it was immediate. Well, they had done it in part of the kitchen, but they had not done it in like other areas, like the nursing, special needs, art rooms. That went through. Treatment recommendations. I will be very honest with the audience. I thought that we were going to have to really do some major treatments because I was very nervous about the cockroach infestation below slab. But we decided to try something and just see how it worked, and if it didn't work, we were ready to pull out something else. So we changed the bait matrix. We made applications based on the label. According to this label, this was a moderate infestation. We didn't need to put out any more than the size of a dime, and trust me, y'all, that was almost too big. But it wasn't the size of a pinhead, it was the size of a dime. We went through 12 tubes and actually was able to make sure that we were able to get this in mechanical rooms, in the kitchen, in areas where we knew the cockroaches were coming, including some of the floor equipment. As you can see in the schematic, this gives you an idea of where we actually placed the baits. It was close to the ground and then up in the ceiling areas, and believe it or not, it took about 2 months, but by the time school opened, right at the end of August, the principal was extremely happy, the IPM coordinator was happy, I was happy because they were happy. So what I really want to leave you guys with is, and this is the information that Dr. Kaler did, and I'm hoping that you guys get this, especially even after Fred speaks, is IPM is a process. There is no silver bullet. It takes inspection. It takes proper identification. Taking action. Notice I went through several steps of taking action. I just didn't say, oh, we went out and put out a bait. You have to do everything. And then evaluating, what did we do? Did it work? Or if it didn't work. One of the things that I have heard was nobody bothered to go back and clean up the dead cockroaches. Coordinator went back in and said, all the cockroaches have got to be cleaned up. This is an important thing because you need to remember that even once you solve the pest problem, you want to make sure that you know what the difference is from an old pest problem to a new pest problem. So I thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley, for filling us in on some very important points on cockroach control in schools. We have Mr. Fred Coble from Port Jefferson School District in New York, who will discuss the challenges school facility managers have with cockroaches and what his district has done to reduce their presence. Fred, can you please tell us some more about cockroaches in your schools?
This is the high school in my school district here, Port Jefferson, which for those of you who don't know where that is, we're on the north shore of Long Island. Long Island is that fish-looking island that sticks off the end of, or is east of New York City. So that being said, I'm in that, northern population, which, is in that lower percentage of population of cockroaches. But it can be a problem. It is not a problem right now here for us at the high school, but, when we look at this building, many people see this, as a place of learning. But when you're in facilities, you look at it as a facility and the problems it presents. This building was built in the early 1930s. It's got a lot of large mechanical chases running from floor to floor, lots of pathways for all different types of pests and vermin to move around the building, and that presents unique challenges. There's a crawl space that runs under the whole building. It's different and it presents challenges. There's dead spaces behind lockers. Students leave food in lockers, all those kinds of things. But most importantly, I want you to think of this. This is a place of learning. Something we hear about when we work in schools. All the time you hear teachers talk about teachable moments. A teachable moment is an unplanned opportunity that arises in the classroom where a teacher has an ideal chance to offer insight to his or her students. A teachable moment is not something you can plan for. Rather, it's a fleeting opportunity that must be sensed and seized by the teacher. When we have any kind of pest infestation, that becomes the teachable moment for us. Okay? This is an actual conversation I had once with a building administrator. In addressing a pest problem, I told the principal, thinking it was obvious to me, take away the pest food source and they will go elsewhere. So I said, we need to get the food out of the classroom. And she said to me, stop it. Can't you just do something? There was the teachable moment. So we discussed IPM, what steps we were taking. We talked about exclusion. We talked about scouting. We talked about sanitation. We talked about removing food. And reluctantly, she agreed to work with me and go along. Okay, and that's the opportunity for you to shine. That's the opportunity to really make progress. So think about your places of learning and who your students are. And I would like to suggest that your custodial and maintenance staff, your food service workers, your teachers and staff, and your students. And you may end up adding other groups there like the PTA and other organizations. Right? So let's start. Let's know what we're fighting and who we're fighting and where we're fighting. Okay, what is the size of the population? Where are we? How do they get there? So this is a very simple pest monitoring sheet where you put your stations, you know, when they were, where they were located, what the date was, and as you check them, what you find. So you're tracking a population, learning where things are. Okay. And, you know, as you've heard a number of times, placements matter. But think like a cockroach. It's not that different from us. What are they looking for? A place to live, warmth, water, food, a safe place, a place to reproduce, you know. So think about where we're going to find them. Think about where they're coming from. You know, we've heard it said placement matters. Let's make sure we look carefully and put those boards in the right places so we get accurate information. For your custodial and maintenance staff, we need to teach them. We need to take this opportunity to talk about good housekeeping, keeping areas clean, disposing of trash, reducing sources of water, repair leaks. You know, let's face it, in many, many schools throughout this country, the maintenance staff has more work to do than they're ever going to get to in a day. Okay? Sometimes we have to step up and say, these are now priorities. These are things we need to take care of every day, right away. You know, so water leaks, for many, I mean, there's the resource we're preserving, there's others, but when we have an infestation, we want to make sure we're eliminating these problems right away. Not, oh, I don't have time for that till I'll get to it. These are ones that have to go to the top of the list, and we need to explain why they need to go to the top of the list. So, you know, I'm not picking on you, but this is how you're going to help. This is what you're going to do. And we need to look at access. We need to look at pathways that our pests are entering our building. Your food service workers, we want to talk to them about checking all their deliveries, breaking up boxes, keeping storerooms neat and clean, keeping food in containers, you know, properly storing food in their storerooms, in their refrigerators, limiting their inventory. Something about schools in general, you know, well, I could order, you know, once a month, or I could just order it all for the whole year and store it. We need to keep people from doing that because that just creates more clutter and more problems, and we're storing stuff and not seeing what's behind it and not seeing what's going on. We need to make sure everybody cleans up thoroughly. In some school districts, particularly in this area, you know, the kitchen staff will do a cleaning, but then the custodial staff come in at night and do a thorough cleaning. We need to make sure that those coordinate well, and there's not a lot of stuff being left around in between. They got to clean under, behind, around. You know, we want to make sure we're not creating, you know, a good environment for these cockroaches. And then the other thing to tell them, especially in food services, if you see something, say something. You know, many times you find food service workers are just afraid to say, hey, I saw a cockroach in my kitchen. You know, and it's much easier when they see one to deal with it than when they're infested. So really encourage them to come forward. Really encourage them to tell you about the problems, and when they do, react to it so they'll tell you again. With your teachers and your staff, okay, we need to have a discussion about food in the classroom. Now here there's a couple of tricky things, okay? In many locations, food in the classroom may be part of a breakfast program, may be part of, you know, and that may be the breakfast those kids are getting that day. So we can't just stomp our feet and say, no, you can't have this food in the classroom, okay, because that's really important to that student's day. But we can say we've got to be part of this conversation about how we're going to distribute this, how we're going to clean it up, how we're going to make sure we don't create a problem in the classroom, okay? And we need to work together with all the staff in making those programs successful. Then you've got the mom and apple pie food in the classroom. You've got cupcakes for birthdays. You've got, I was just 2 weeks ago, my grandson is a first grade student in Brooklyn, New York, and I went in for his class's Thanksgiving feast, and there was food for everybody to share, and people brought all different food from all their cultures, and it was a great day. But again, that custodial staff, it was interesting to watch. I saw a custodian in that room 3 or 4 times saying, let me empty this now. Okay, here's another bag. Let me empty this now. Here's another bag. and at the end of the day was coming around, with a mop and everything. Did anything get spilled? Does anything need to be cleaned up? These guys are on top of it and doing it, okay? And that's the kind of thing we have to work with staff and work with each other to make happen. We've got to talk to teachers about giving us a room that's cleanable, that's not so cluttered that you can't get around and get to everything, that we can maintain it and give that good learning environment. And the last thing we want to make sure we touch base on is explain to them this is not a do-it-yourself project. This is not, you know what, I'll get rid of these cockroaches. I'm going to go down the aisle in the grocery store and let me get that can of stuff that I saw on TV last night, and I'm just going to spray it around the room. That's not the answer. That's not going to help anybody. That's going to create more problems. And in fact, in New York State, I can speak that it would be illegal. I'm sure in many other parts of the country it is also. With clutter control, again, look at the environments we're creating here, the cardboard, the harborages. It's just something, we've got to make sure we're not promoting the problem. Your students, it's an opportunity for the custodians, the maintenance staff, the food service workers, the teachers, everybody to help them recognize where they can help with the problem. Slightly different topic, but we were looking in the elementary school to kickstart the recycling program in the cafeteria, and what we did with the students is they had an environmental club, and after school we saved all the garbage from that day's lunch service. So there was like 8 barrels of garbage, and we laid out a big sheet of plastic on the floor and dumped all the garbage, and we gave the kids booties and gloves and asked them to sort it. And they were just shocked at the number of uneaten pieces of fruit, at the paper goods that were thrown in this. How they saw the opportunities before them. That the opportunities there. Well, kids will soak this stuff up if you explain it to them. Kids will understand this if you talk to them about why it's important the food goes in this barrel, why it's important that we don't leave stuff around the classroom, why it's important they keep their lockers clean. They'll get it, okay? They don't think about it until you point it out to them. Look for those moments to engage them and educate them. And we're back to where we started, okay? But this is also a place where people learn. And this is my school, but it could be any school, anywhere. All of them are places where people learn. Students spend more waking hours at school than they do anywhere else. It's their workplace. And remember this about students, particularly elementary school students, they're not small adults. Okay, they're developing young people. Their immune system is not quite developed. Their respiratory system is still developing, so they're more susceptible to all the effects of their environment. Okay, we in the facilities world get to set the table for these kids every day. If we provide a clean, safe, well-lit, well-ventilated, and well-maintained buildings, if we utilize the principles of IPM and environmentally preferable cleaning products and procedures, the result is a better learning environment, a place where students can and will achieve. Everybody, when you get to your budget meetings and you're working on your school budget, it's, we're worrying about test scores. We're worrying about test scores. Well, this is an opportunity for another teaching moment to say, you know what? It's documenting that well-lit, well-cleaned, well-ventilated, healthy learning environments improve test scores. And that's the part we have to remember in facilities. We're part of the educational process, and we're part of the educational process on many levels. And working with the teachers, working with the staff, working with the students, working with the communities helps move the whole process forward. So that's just a little look at the culture and some of the issues we have to tackle in schools. And I think it goes hand in hand with what the other two presenters said. And I thank you all for joining me today.
Well, thank you, Mr. Coble, for your informative discussion about controlling cockroaches through IPM in your Long Island School District, and for sharing your teachable moments. Thank you again to our great presenters, Dr. Phil Kaler from the University of Florida, Ms. Janet Hurley from Texas A&M AgriLife Extension, and Mr. Fred Coble from the School District of Port Jefferson, Long Island, New York. And to each and every one of you for participating in this webinar.